This is also a time of change for my family.
The garden party was supposed to be graceful, polished, and predictable. Then everything changed at the entrance. Camilla arrived expecting the old order to bend around her, but instead, a senior aide stepped forward with a quiet instruction that froze the entire path ahead. She was not being delayed. She was not being redirected. She was being refused entry, and Charles' office had made the decision permanent. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Camilla did not move at first. She held her gloves tighter, as if one small grip could keep the whole moment from breaking open. The senior aide lowered his voice, but the words still carried the force of a public wound. She could not proceed. The royal garden party, a formal palace gathering where selected guests meet members of the monarchy in recognition of public service, would continue without her. That was why the moment mattered. This was not a private dinner, not a missed carriage, not a simple rearrangement behind closed doors. This was a public-facing occasion, and her absence would speak before anyone else could explain it. Charles was not beside her, and that absence struck harder than the refusal itself. Camilla understood the difference between nervous staff and real authority. Charles' office, the small inner team that controls the king's official diary and instructions, had not made a soft request. It had issued a permanent order removing her from future attendance at that palace-hosted function. The queen consort stared toward the entrance, where guests were already inside, voices rising in polite confidence, unaware that a royal fracture had just opened outside the gate. The aide did not apologize twice. He only held his position. A folded card rested in the aide's hand, marked with the office seal, a formal sign showing the instruction carried official weight. Camilla saw it. She saw the controlled look on his face. She saw, too, how one courtier stepped back instead of stepping in. That courtier's silence told her everything. No one was going to rescue this moment. No one was going to correct the order. The refusal was not a mistake inside the machine. The refusal was the machine doing exactly what it had been told to do. Camilla finally turned away, but she did not look defeated. She looked wounded in a way that frightened the people watching, because pain inside the palace never stays private for long. Charles had chosen firmness through his office, and the crown had chosen order over protection. Yet the sharper mystery still waited beneath the surface. Why this day? Why this gate? Why make the break impossible to hide? And before Camilla could understand the full weight of what had just happened, the people closest to the crown were already measuring what her exclusion meant for them. No royal decision lands on one person alone. It travels through rooms, glances, loyalties, and old wounds. Camilla felt the door close, but Charles carried the burden of allowing it. William watched what it meant for the future. Catherine understood the emotional cost of public dignity. And within the palace, every person close to the crown knew this was not just about one garden party. It was about power. Charles stood at the center of it because the instruction had come from his office, not from a nervous official trying to avoid embarrassment. The king's office means the small inner team that manages his official diary, approvals, messages, and palace instructions. So when that office speaks, the palace hears the monarch's authority behind it. That was why the refusal mattered so deeply. Camilla had not been stopped by chance. She had been stopped by a system that people believed Charles had either approved, allowed, or chosen not to challenge. William understood the same thing from a different angle. To him, the garden party was not just a polished royal event. It was a public promise, a place where ordinary guests were invited into the monarchy's world and expected calm, dignity, and trust. If Camilla's presence now threatened to pull attention away from service and turn the day into another palace drama, then the prince saw the refusal not as cruelty, but as containment. He did not celebrate it, he measured it. Camilla sat alone in a side room after the gate closed, her hat still pinned, her coat still buttoned, her posture still holding the shape of royalty. But her eyes told the truth her body refused to admit. The queen consort was not grieving one missed afternoon. She was grieving the loss of assumed protection, the painful discovery that being close to Charles no longer guaranteed that the palace would bend around her. Charles received the first internal note about her reaction and lowered it onto his desk without speaking. The paper did not accuse him, but the silence around it did. He knew Camilla would read the decision as abandonment, even if the palace called it necessity. He knew the monarch had survived by choosing the crown before comfort. But this time the cost had a face, a voice, and a room waiting for him. Catherine's calm made the tension sharper. She moved through the occasion with careful grace, yet staff noticed she was not surprised by the new boundary. The Princess of Wales, meaning the wife of the heir to the throne, and a future queen in waiting, seemed to have sensed the shift before the gates ever closed. That quiet composure unsettled people because it suggested the refusal had roots. A senior private secretary finally warned that reversing the order would damage the office more than enforcing it. That sentence turned Camilla's humiliation into an institutional test. The palace could absorb pain, but it could not afford uncertainty. And as Charles, Camilla, William, and Catherine each carried the shock in different ways, one truth began to rise from beneath the polished surface. The garden party refusal was not the beginning. It was the result of something buried deeper, and to understand why the gate closed so sharply, the story has to move backward to the private moment that made Camilla's presence impossible to defend. Every royal rupture has a moment people later pretend they did not see coming. In this story, that moment was not the garden party. It happened weeks earlier, behind polished doors, during what was meant to be a quiet family luncheon. A single exchange changed the temperature of the room. One sentence landed too sharply. One chair moved back too quickly. And from that day onward, Camilla's place was no longer secure. Camilla noticed the paper before anyone explained it. Catherine's name sat above hers on the draft reception order, and the queen consort tapped the sheet once, then again, as if each touch might force the room to admit what it had done. Clarence House, the royal residence long used for senior family meetings and private coordination, had become the place where a quiet lunch turned into a warning. The luncheon mattered because it was meant to settle household planning before the garden party, and because everyone at that table understood that order on a page could become power in public. Charles wanted calm, but calm was already slipping away. William wanted clarity, because the prince believed the garden party had to stay focused on guests, service, and public trust. Catherine wanted dignity, and she held herself still when Camilla asked why the future queen was being treated as though the present queen had already stepped aside. A reception order means the planned ranking of who appears, greets, or stands first at an official event. And this one told a story nobody wanted to say aloud. Catherine did not strike back. She folded her hands, lowered her gaze, and let the silence do what anger could not. William saw the hurt she refused to show, and his restraint grew colder by the second. Camilla saw that restraint too, and it wounded her pride because the future king was not begging for peace. He was watching her measure herself against Catherine, and he was remembering every word. Charles ended it. The king pushed back his chair, placed his napkin beside the plate, and told the room that his office would handle all future decisions. That office, the inner team that manages the monarch's official diary and instructions, would now take control from emotion, from history, and from personal appeal. Camilla understood the danger at once, yet she still believed Charles would soften it later. She was wrong, and everyone would soon know. That sentence became the hinge of everything. The Clarence House luncheon gave the palace its reason. The garden party would give it the stage. And when private hurt turned into public exclusion, the next step was no longer conversation. It was confrontation. By the time Camilla reached Charles, the palace had already absorbed the shock and turned it into procedure. That was what wounded her most. Not the aide, not the gate, not even the guests who noticed. It was the smoothness of it all. The refusal had been executed too cleanly, too calmly. And when she entered the private room where Charles waited, she did not ask what happened. She asked why he let it happen. Camilla stepped inside and told the aide to leave. No photographer waited. No public explanation softened the air. No careful witness remained to turn pain into protocol. The private sitting room, a closed royal space used for confidential family conversations away from official ceremony, mattered because it stripped the moment down to its truth. This was not the crown speaking to the country. This was a wife standing before her husband after being stopped like an outsider. Charles sat near the writing table with the permanent attendance instruction already before him. That instruction meant a formal palace order removing Camilla from future garden party appearances. Not just one afternoon's schedule. The closed file gave her the answer before he did. The king had known. He had seen the order. He had allowed the gate to close while she walked toward it, believing there was still protection around her name. Camilla removed her gloves slowly and placed them on the table between them. The gesture stayed controlled, but her voice carried the humiliation she had been forced to swallow in silence. She told Charles no wife should learn her standing from an aide at a gate. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Every word landed with the weight of someone who had already been wounded in public and refused to bleed in front of strangers. Charles did not deny her pain, and that made the room colder. He said the office had to protect the crown from another public strain. The crown, meaning the monarchy as an institution beyond one person, had become the shield he used and the wall she could not cross. Camilla heard the hidden meaning at once. The palace had chosen stability over softness. The king had chosen duty over rescue. Camilla asked whether William had pushed for it. Charles looked away before answering, and that pause spoke more clearly than denial. He did not blame the prince, but he did not clear him either. The future king had seen the danger after the Clarence House luncheon, and Charles knew his son's silence had helped the decision harden. Charles then revealed the truth she feared. The exclusion had been made permanent because the office believed any future appearance would reopen the conflict that began at that luncheon. The refusal was meant to end the pattern, not simply prevent one awkward afternoon. Camilla left the room with her pride intact but her certainty broken. This was not a mistake to reverse. It was a line drawn by the king's own system, and the deeper danger was not in her anger. It was in discovering who inside the palace now had the power to make that line hold. In royal life, power rarely announces itself loudly. It appears in margins, signatures, calendars, and doors that no longer open. Charles' office did not need a speech to change Camilla's reality. It needed one instruction, one circulation list, and one decision that no aide dared soften. Behind the garden party refusal was a machinery older than emotion, colder than loyalty, and strong enough to turn a private marriage into a public boundary. The private secretary read the wording one final time before placing it before Charles. He understood the danger hidden inside every careful phrase. A private secretary is the senior aide who manages the monarch's official work, messages, and decisions, so his pen often turns royal feeling into palace action. That was why this moment mattered. The decision had to survive pressure from Camilla's household, questions from William's team, and the quiet pain Charles would carry once the words became real. Charles lifted the page and read it once without speaking. Then the king read it again, slower this time, stopping at the line that confirmed permanence. The phrase used inside the office was continuity measure, a plain way of saying the garden party would move forward in future years without Camilla listed as a principal attendee. The language sounded clean, almost harmless, but Charles knew what it meant. His wife was being removed from a public rhythm she had expected to keep, and the office was making that removal look like order. The private secretary watched the king's hand hover near the pen. That small pause said more than any confession. Charles was not indifferent. He was not careless. He was choosing discipline over tenderness, and that choice cut through the room with a force no one dared name. The monarch's face tightened, not with anger, but with recognition. He was no longer deciding only for Camilla. He was deciding for the crown, for the next reign, and for the fragile trust the palace feared losing. William's office appeared on the final circulation list, and that changed the meaning of everything. The prince was not merely being informed as a son, he was being aligned as the future king. The final communication meant the present reign, and the next one would stand behind the same boundary. Camilla's exclusion was no longer just about attendance. It had become part of a succession-era settlement, a quiet agreement about who would carry the monarchy forward, and who would no longer shape its public center. Catherine's household received the update without celebration. That restraint mattered. The princess did not need triumph, and the palace could not afford it. Any visible satisfaction would turn control into cruelty, and cruelty into family war. So the message moved silently, and the decision hardened silently with it. Once the instruction was circulated, the consequences began moving faster than anyone could contain. Not in headlines first, but in the way people inside the palace started treating Camilla differently. And the first sign of that new reality came not from a newspaper, but from a corridor, where the queen consort suddenly found herself walking alone. The cruelest part of palace fallout is that it begins quietly. A name disappears from a list. A car is no longer summoned. A seat remains unassigned. Nobody raises their voice, but everyone understands. Camilla's world does not collapse in one dramatic burst. It contracts inch by inch, through gestures so small they almost look polite. And that is what makes them impossible to fight. Camilla's office received the revised schedule before lunch, and the silence around it felt sharper than any announcement. The official hosting calendar, meaning the palace diary that shows which royal figures will attend and represent the monarch at public events, no longer carried her name beside future garden parties. That mattered because this was not gossip moving through corridors. It was structure. It was the monarchy turning absence into routine. The page offered no handwritten note, no gentle explanation, no private mercy from Charles. Camilla stood in the corridor with the paper lowered at her side. She had read the line once, then again, hoping the blank space would somehow change. Staff who once moved around the queen consort with easy deference now paused before answering simple questions. Not because they disliked her, but because the instruction had made her position uncertain. A junior aide asked whether she wanted tea, and the ordinary kindness almost broke her composure. Camilla nodded, then looked away, because even kindness now felt like pity. Charles heard soon after that she had withdrawn to her rooms. The king asked whether she had eaten, and the question carried tenderness, but not rescue. That was the pain of it. He could worry about her comfort while still leaving the order untouched. He could feel the wound and still protect the decision that caused it. Charles understood the contradiction, and it sat heavily with him because the crown had demanded firmness, while marriage asked for something softer. Then a second consequence began to surface. Invitations already linked to Camilla were quietly reassigned, and Catherine's name appeared where the queen consort expected hers to remain. Catherine did not ask for that replacement, and she did not celebrate it, but her presence gave the palace what it wanted: steadiness, calm, and a future-facing image. The Princess of Wales, the title used for the wife of the heir to the throne, now stood closer to the center of the garden party structure, without needing to say a word. William noticed the revised hosting sequence, and did not object. The prince did not push Camilla further out, but his silence made the new order stronger. For him, stability mattered more than sentiment, and the future king understood that a boundary only works if no one rushes to soften it. Camilla felt wounded, Charles remained conflicted, and William stayed watchful. But the next shift would not come from schedules, offices, or palace language. Only when the institution stepped out of the room could the human truth finally step forward. After the gates, the order, the confrontation, and the cold machinery of the palace, the turning point arrives without ceremony. No office seal, no staff memo, no public statement. Just two people in a room, speaking as themselves for the first time in days. Charles and Camilla have survived storms before, but this one feels different, because it is not about the outside world judging them. It is about whether they still recognize each other inside the crown. Charles came to her without warning. He did not send an aide ahead, did not ask a secretary to smooth the path, and did not carry a folder as protection. The household had gone quiet, and that mattered, because the palace could no longer hide behind procedure. The crown, meaning the monarchy as an institution beyond any one person, had already made its choice. Now the king had to face the woman who had paid the emotional price for it. Camilla sat near the window with the garden party hat resting on a chair beside her. That hat became the cruel symbol of the day, dressed for acceptance, left with exclusion. She looked at Charles with no anger at first, and that restraint unsettled him more than fury. The queen consort told him the permanent instruction had not merely embarrassed her, it had made her feel erased, as if her place could be removed from a list, and then removed from memory. Charles listened without interrupting. He admitted that he had failed to protect her from the manner of the refusal, even if he still believed the decision itself was necessary. That distinction hurt them both. The king could apologize for the wound, but he would not undo the cause. Camilla heard the apology and understood its limit. It was tenderness without rescue, regret without reversal, love trapped inside duty. Camilla then asked the question that had been waiting beneath every silence. Was Catherine now the face the palace preferred? Charles chose his words carefully, because one careless answer could turn sadness back into war. He said the monarchy had to move toward the people who could carry its next chapter. The next chapter meant the future shape of the royal family, the public roles, the trusted faces, and the emotional image that would define what came after his reign. The meaning was gentle, but final. Camilla stopped asking for the order to be reversed. That was the turning point. She asked only whether the public explanation would humiliate her further. Charles promised it would not. It was the last protection he could still offer, and she accepted it, because there was nothing else left to hold. The private war had reached its settlement. But peace did not feel like victory. Camilla had not regained the gate. Charles had not escaped the cost. And outside the palace walls, the country was about to turn one closed entrance into a national symbol. What began as a private palace decision was now ready to become something far larger. A story the entire country could see, judge, and remember. By morning, the palace could no longer control the shape of the story. The image was too simple, too brutal, too easy to understand. A queen stopped at a gate while the king's office stood behind the order. It did not need explanation to wound. It did not need scandalous language to spread. Britain looked at that closed entrance and saw more than protocol. It saw a marriage, a monarchy, and a future being rearranged. Camilla saw the front page at breakfast and went still. The London Herald had placed a full-width image of the palace garden gates beneath the headline, "The Queen Who Could Not Enter." The newspaper mattered because it turned a controlled palace decision into a public symbol. A garden party, meaning a formal royal gathering where invited guests are recognized for service and loyalty, had become the scene of exclusion. The queen consort had already lived the humiliation once. Now the country was replaying it over tea tables, broadcasts, and morning conversations. Charles watched the coverage from his desk and asked for the volume to be lowered. The king was not angry at the press in that moment. He looked weary, because the private cost of the decision was now being turned into public meaning. A morning broadcaster described the refusal as the first visible sign that Charles' reign is now preparing for William's era. That line mattered because it moved the story beyond marriage. It made the gate feel like a marker of succession, the slow passing of influence from one royal generation to the next. Camilla folded the newspaper before finishing the article. The gesture was quiet, but sharp enough to reveal everything she refused to say. She had accepted Charles' promise that the public explanation would not humiliate her further, yet the silence around her name was already doing that work. The palace statement spoke of future scheduling priorities, and the king's continuing focus on service. It avoided Camilla completely, and that omission became louder than any insult. Crowds began gathering outside Buckingham Palace, not with banners, not with fury, but with curiosity. Buckingham Palace, the monarch's central working residence and one of the most recognized symbols of royal authority, now looked to the public like the place where a private line had become national fact. People held up phones toward the gates, trying to capture the spot where the story had taken root. They were not seeing the room where Charles apologized. They were seeing the entrance where Camilla had been stopped. William heard the broadcaster's words and understood the danger inside them. The prince did not need the story to become a celebration of his future. Catherine understood that too. The princess remained careful, because any hint of triumph would turn a controlled transition into open cruelty. Still, the public had already sensed the shift. Camilla's exclusion had not weakened the decision. It had confirmed it. Public reaction did not reverse the order. It made the order feel permanent. And when the noise finally settled, the truth left behind was simpler, colder, and more lasting than any headline. In the end, the garden party was never just a garden party. It became the place where private loyalty met public duty and lost. Camilla was not destroyed by one closed gate, but she was changed by it. Charles was not freed by the decision, but he was defined by it. And the monarchy, watching itself from within, understood that the future had arrived not with a coronation, but with an exclusion. Camilla's permanent removal from that garden party role became the line everyone understood, even if few dared to say it plainly. A garden party is a formal royal gathering, where invited guests are recognized for service, loyalty, and public contribution, and that was why her absence carried such force. Charles' office had placed institutional stability above personal reassurance. The king had not simply allowed a schedule change. He had allowed the monarchy to protect itself from the emotional storm around his wife. The crown did not collapse. The gates opened again. Guests arrived. Conversations continued. The palace moved with its familiar rhythm, and that normality became part of the verdict. The crown, meaning the monarchy as an institution beyond one person, survives by absorbing pain and moving forward. That is its strength. That is also its cruelty. Camilla had learned that the palace could wound someone deeply, then continue with perfect manners. Camilla attended a smaller private engagement days later, composed and carefully dressed, but those close enough to see her noticed the difference. She smiled when required, answered gently, and carried herself with discipline. Yet the queen consort no longer moved as though every room automatically belonged to her. Something had shifted. Her place remained real, but it was no longer unquestioned. Access itself had become conditional. Charles carried the burden in a quieter way. Before one reception, the king paused near a corridor where Camilla once would have walked beside him. He did not reverse the order. He did not challenge the system that had made it permanent. But he felt the absence. The monarch had chosen endurance over comfort, and the husband inside him had to live with the cost. William and Catherine stepped more visibly into the garden party structure, not with triumph, but with steadiness. The prince inherited more than authority. He inherited responsibility. The princess became a quiet symbol of continuity, calm enough to hold the next chapter without appearing hungry for it. Their presence confirmed what the palace statement never said directly. The monarchy had begun arranging itself around the future. Camilla remained part of the royal story, but no longer at the unquestioned center of its public path. Charles chose the crown's survival over his wife's certainty. William accepted the weight of what came next. Catherine carried the image of stability. And the monarchy proved its oldest instinct again. When survival demands a choice, the institution closes the door softly, then keeps it closed. The story ends with the gate closed, the order standing, and every person involved changed by the knowledge that love may live inside the palace, but the crown decides who enters. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.